All these liberals and social democrats are pro-imperialists. It's just these scumbags prefer low-intensity warfare, sanctions, drone strikes, proxies, internal subversions. Yeah, hybrid war. I think hybrid war is the best concept for it. That's the concept created by Vijay Prashad to describe all the various, covert and not covert techniques that the U.S. uses to create regime change. And for those who don't know, right now I'm working on a Venezuela book. I'm going to write a book about U.S. imperialism in Venezuela, or I'm in the process of writing it. It's done a lot of research for it already. And I have the whole outline done. I'm just extending some parts and doing some more research. But as I'm looking at Venezuela more closely than I ever have, which I did my undergraduate thesis on Venezuela, but now, 2-3 years later, I have a better understanding of Marxism, better understanding of Leninism, of imperialism, of capitalism in general. So I want to go back and take an even deeper look at Venezuela, extend my thesis into a book. But long story short, sorry to ramble about the book I'm writing. I'm really excited. But the U.S. uses hybrid war against Venezuela. It's not just one technique. It's not just one thing they do to destabilize this country. Because sometimes you hear like, oh, sanctions, that doesn't seem that bad. Oh, they recognize Juan Guaido. That doesn't seem that bad. Oh, they fund the opposition. That doesn't seem that bad. In isolation, these things don't seem that bad, or you don't see how it could put Venezuela into poverty, or prevent them from constructing socialism. But combined together, the hybrid of these various attacks are what make them so devastating. Like, by example, with Venezuela, the U.S. Sanctions caused a bunch of their assets to get frozen globally. So Venezuela is engaging in trade or whatever with other countries. So other countries are hanging on to their resources. The U.S. sanctions prevent countries from trading with Venezuela. So they place sanctions when Venezuelan commodities are overseas. And then the U.S.'s allies have just frozen Venezuela's assets, just said, you're not getting this back. We're not going to trade with you anymore. And we're just going to keep all the resources that you were trading with us before. The UK did this with a bunch of gold. Countries have done it with their oil in many cases. And then after that, the U.S. declares Guaido the president of Venezuela, legally recognizes him, which a lot of people have laughed at and called a meme. And it is funny, that meme, Juan Guaido is the U.S. declares Juan Guaido the president of Taiwan or whatever. They're just going to recognize Juan Guaido as the leader of whatever country they want. But what that did legally was it made it so Venezuela was not an internationally recognized government. Other U.S. allies and U.S. puppet states didn't recognize Venezuela internationally. So if you have a government that's not recognized, it doesn't have the same protections under international law. And all of these countries who had Venezuela's assets sitting in their banks that had been frozen by the sanctions just started siphoning the assets, just started taking them, or giving them either to the Western state apparatus, or giving them to oil companies or various multinationals, like the U.S. did with the oil they intercepted from Iran to Houston. From Iran to Venezuela, they took it to Houston and gave it to multinationals. So it's the combination of the sanctions, and then the declaring Juan Guaido not the president, which was only possible because of millions of dollars that NGOs funneled into the Venezuelan opposition party, which on top of that, when this political and economic crisis and instability is created, the U.S. launches a coup attempt in 2019, an armed violent coup. So it's a hybrid of methods. There's so many different attacks that the U.S. use in conjunction and in cooperation with each other, right? Not in isolation. And they're very strategic with how they do it. So, all right, end rant. That went on longer than I thought. Eric the Bread, what's up, Eric? How are you?